Hi, Tammy. Can you hear me all right?
I can, Spencer. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. Trying to decide what is the best angle to have that. I think this is it. I think that's good. I was on a go-to meeting and I needed to be on the other side, and so it's odd.
Yeah, bouncing between the different ones.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you, I'm just going to play this video. I just want to make sure the sound's coming through. There's
Yeah,
no
absolutely.
reason to share.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm Anita Wilcox. Please join me.
Did you hear that?
I did.
Okay, perfect.
I love this. I just wish I could see their face.
Yeah, I thought we were originally doing it that way, but
Yeah,
I guess it's better than nothing.
it is. It works well. So all of a sudden, the camera on my main screens is working now. All of a sudden, so I'm not on my laptop, and it's much better for me. So.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what changed.
Yeah, I can take a look at that later. That's interesting that yeah, you didn't get the normal camera to work.
Yeah, so. But it's working now, so I'm not complaining.
That works for me. There we go. And you can see the shared screen, all right?
I can. Looks good.
Perfect. Okay.
Recording started, so that's good.
Perfect. You might see me pass by you real quick. I realized I left my laptop over there. I'm just gonna grab it, but I'm connected on my phone, so you should still be able to talk,
Okay,
hear me.
Yeah, no worries. Good afternoon, Director Galliano. Nice to see you on the call today. Hi, Tim. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Hi,
Great.
Tammy. Hi, Director Galliano. Spencer,
Howdy.
how are you today?
Welcome, Director Risby.
Hi, Tammy.
Good afternoon, Director.
Hey, Tim.
Good afternoon, Director.
Hi, Director Denstedt.
Afternoon. How is everybody?
Doing well, thank you.
Doing great.
Fantastic. All right, I need to go get myself a notepad. I'll be right back. Okay. We need to come up with background music if we're going to keep doing this. Otherwise, people need to talk to each other when they're here.
I could sing.
Would you please do a little ditty? Little soft toe. Go right ahead. Tim, amuse us. Go ahead. We'll call it intermission.
Yeah. I wasn't hired for my creative skills.
I beg to differ. Tim, I think you've been very creative on some solutions.
Hi, Jeff. Welcome to the meeting.
I don't think he's all there yet.
I think not. There he is.
There's a little bit of a delay, Tammy, coming in from the waiting room. I don't know what it is.
Okay, I'll have Spencer take a look at it.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Good morning or afternoon.
No, afternoon. Don't throw us off. We're
Sorry,
already
sorry.
off enough. Zoom has already screwed up everything.
I know.
Bring it here because I can throw it one more time before we start. Give it to me. Okay. So in case anybody ever wonders why I lean down, it's because the little dog brings me the ball, because obviously when mom sits in this chair, it's time to play ball. So I got to pick the ball up from the ground and throw it down the hall so they can chase after it. So just so you know, otherwise I get somebody scratching at me on my leg.
Good afternoon, Director Gardner, Director Torres.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Good afternoon.
how's everybody?
Excellent.
Great.
Why would anybody be any other way?
It's all good.
It's all good. It's raining. It's like pennies from heaven.
Spoken like a true water guy.
That's right. A water nerd.
Mhm.
Just so everyone knows, we will be recording this Zoom meeting for play later. So we are recording now.
Okay.
All right, we got about 2 minutes, Tammy.
Yes.
Do we have a pre-recorded pledge?
We do.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
We do.
Hello, all.
Hi,
Hello.
Director.
Here.
All right, it looks like it is 1 o'clock. This is the special board meeting of the board of directors. Not sure how that's right.
Long day,
board
Craig.
of directors. No, I'm trying to read. This is hard.
This is what happens when you turn a year older, Craig. By the way, everybody, it was Craig, the general manager's birthday yesterday. So we're going to wish him a happy belated birthday.
Happy birthday, Craig.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Craig.
Let's celebrate with a rate workshop. That's what everyone wants to do for their birthday. So this is a workshop for the water and sewer rates for the Western Board, March 11th, 2021 at 1 p.m. Tammy, could you read in our coronavirus protocols, please?
Yes, thank you. In an effort to protect public health and prevent the spread of COVID-19, and in accordance with the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, the public may view this board meeting virtually via Zoom, as there will be no public location for attending in person. This Zoom meeting will be recorded and available to view after the conclusion of today's workshop on Western's website at WMWD.com. As stated on the agenda, members of the public who wish to comment on any item within the jurisdiction of the district or any item on the agenda may make comments virtually or by submitting comments on the district's website. There will be several opportunities during today's workshop to make public comments, including at the beginning of the workshop, at the midway point of the workshop after a planned break, and at the end of the workshop. Written comments received before 4:30 p.m. March 10th, 2021 will be made part of the board meeting record. For those participating in the Zoom virtual meeting who wish to provide public comments, please indicate such by using the raise hand feature, which may be accessed by opening the participant list and clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of the list. For those participating by telephone who wish to provide public comment, you may do so by pressing *6 to unmute yourself. If there is more than one caller, you will be identified and called on one at a time. Any public comment will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. I will now take roll call for the board meeting. Due to the complexity of conducting this meeting by Zoom and telephonically, I will not be taking roll call for staff members or the public at this time. Director Galliano.
Here.
Thank you. Director Rizvi.
Here.
Director Gardner.
I am here.
Director Torres.
Here.
President Denstedt.
I am present. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. President Denstedt, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. At this time, we'll go ahead and proceed with our pre-recorded Pledge of Allegiance done by one of our staff members. If everyone could please rise and mute, that would be appreciated.
I'm Anita Wilcox. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very nicely done, Ms. Wilcox. We certainly appreciate you being willing to come forward and pre-record that for us. So I think this, Craig, has been a wonderful addition, given the fact that it's very difficult to do on Zoom, and it was kind of chaos when everybody was saying it all at once at a different pace. So I think this has been wonderful. So I congratulate the employees on stepping up and being so gracious to do these pre-recordings for us. So thank you on that. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move into public comment. And this would be.
Yeah, thank you, Director. We do have, Tammy, we do have written comments that were submitted for this meeting. And then, so I think we should go ahead and read those comments that we received, and then we'll move forward with taking comments for those that are participating virtually today. So Tammy, do you want to go ahead and read the comments that you've received so far?
Yes, thank you. The first comment received was from Cecilia Donnelly. Cecilia states, "We already pay ridiculous high rates that are added onto our actual water bill. How can you possibly justify increasing these charges? My bill is less than $8 for water. The other ridiculous charges increase it to almost $130 with nothing I can do to reduce it. That was the end of her comment. The second comment was made by Donald Sardano. Donald states, water is already too expensive in Southern California. We are a coastal state. Desalination plants have been constructed and are operational, which was supposed to reduce costs. And here we are talking about increasing costs. The leadership on the utilities is clearly similar to the state. Absurd. End of his comment. The third comment was received by Drew Peterson. Drew states, rate increase is unreasonable currently. People are not working and unemployment high. Infrastructure cost cannot be passed on to consumers in the monopoly Western Municipal Water District created. When I add a new structure or new equipment, I cannot increase costs and pass through to my customers. I would lose business. Oh yeah, you are a monopoly. So you have a captured audience. Since agriculture in our area has dried up, you continue to increase fee schedule to meet the obligations of your unsustainable legacy pensions. You need to stop and think. No longer customers will support unrealistic system. End of comment. The last comment was received by Thomas Lowe. Thomas states, I fail to understand why there has been a 500% rate increase since 1999. As a ratepayer, I use less water now compared to then. The water company has spent vast sums on lavish new offices. Apparently they are too nice for a ratepayer to see. Also a new pipeline on Victoria to export water elsewhere. Also costly expenses for underutilized new facilities and offices at the service yard. I asked an executive about the new office building. Her explanation was the air conditioner was unreliable at the old office building. Also, they got a real good deal on the new place. I pointed out that the repair expense would be necessary to attract a future tenant. The answer was she never thought of that. Anyway, I was told that a nice new office workplace would make doing work nicer. Housing, cars, gasoline, and groceries have not increased 500%. What is the justification for a rate increase? I know nothing will change as a result of these comments. However, someone will actually read this. Thanks for reading. I feel better now. End of comment. And that concludes the written comments received.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Tammy. President Denstead, do you want to call for comments of those who are participating in the meeting today?
Yes, let's go ahead and take those comments
And
now.
Tammy can run through those as she sees. I see we have at least one person who's raised their hand. So Tammy, can you run us through the participants that are on the meeting? And I'll remind everyone that you have 3 minutes for comments.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to call Laura Martin.
Thank you. Commenting on the rate increase, I understand that costs have increased because costs have increased to our business as well. So I understand that, and I understand that somebody has to pay the costs. What I'm asking today is that Western Municipal look at 2 different methods of reducing overall costs, not only to themselves, but to us as consumers. I'm asking for you guys to go back to your source of water and do harder negotiations. You guys are more or less a water broker, and you're responsible for negotiating the best rate on water that you get and not necessarily just passing the costs on to us to absorb. Not only are you guys talking about a higher tier for water, you guys are also affecting our water budgets, which affects our overall cost of water. In November, I paid an increased cost in water, not because I used more, because in fact I used less, but you arbitrarily changed my water budget. I was given a reason that the moisture in the air or the humidity would have affected the way I should have used my sprinklers that month, but we aren't meteorologists. We don't necessarily know every month what the humidity is going to be like. And this is Southern California. Sometimes we do get rain one day and the next day it's a balmy 78 degrees. A little bit of moisture in the air is also good for the soil. It helps keeps bugs alive, birds feed off of them, and they help control the decay in our yards and around us. So a little bit of extra moisture in our yards is perfectly appropriate. I'm also asking you guys to look at the way you do your water budgets. You arbitrarily give people with more people in the household a larger budget, while people who have a smaller household like myself have a lower budget, but we still have needs. This is an agricultural community. This is a rural community. A lot of people work in their yards. A lot of people have blue collar jobs. They get dirty after work and they need a wash. They need a shower. They need to do their clothes. I'm also saying that all pets matter, not just dogs. Cats' lives matter. Cats are not included in the water allocation budget, as are dogs. And my cat, I have 3 of them. I have one that's really large. I don't know why. She gets the same food and access to food as the other animals in my house, but she's a large animal and would rival the size of any type of cockapoo chihuahua. So why would that chihuahua get a larger water budget for a house, whereas cat owners, they don't get that? So I'm asking for you guys to be equitable in the way you distribute the budget. Don't distribute it per person, because a 10-person house might have 5 people who are working that can pay that water bill. You might have a 2-person house and only 1 person in that 2-person house is working to be able to afford the water. We do value our properties. We have a lot of acreage, and we ask that you negotiate tougher rates. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for your comments. We do appreciate that. Tammy, is there anybody else for public comment?
Yes, I'd like to call John Farnsworth.
Hi, I don't know. Can you hear me? I can't tell.
Yes, Mr. Farnsworth, we can hear you.
Oh, good, because I don't see that I'm on camera. That's fine. So I went through your briefing that was provided with this meeting notice. Once again, as you've done in prior years, it's very high level, no specific information. I have 3 specific questions that I think you should answer and make the public aware of it. One, when I looked at this several years ago, you had a surplus of $130 million. I'd like to know how much that surplus has increased over the last 3 years. Secondly, 2 years ago, I got involved in your meetings and questioned when there was an underrun of the operating budget for the year, rather than put those funds in a reserve account so the offset higher rates. The choice instead was made to find new projects to spend that money on. So I'd like an answer for those projects. And has there been a surplus for the last 3 years where it's been reallocated? And my third question, what percentage increase have you all given to your employees over the last 3 years? How close is it to the cost of inflation? It should be at or below those numbers. So those are my 3 questions that I'd like to have specifically answered and included in all public presentations going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farnsworth. We appreciate your comments today. Tammy,
No,
is
they
there
were not
anyone
comments,
else?
they were questions.
Yeah, and staff is madly writing those down. So thank you so
I
much.
just want to make sure the comments
yes.
are comments, questions are questions.
And we appreciate you being here today. Tammy, is there any other person for public comments today?
I see no other hands raised.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Craig, we'll go ahead and continue on with the presentation.
All right, thank you very much. So we just have one item on the agenda, that is our second workshop. Today's workshop will build on what was presented at the last workshop. So it has a little bit more detail in it. These are more detailed issues that are all part of the complex rate process. We're going to start off the presentation today talking, first we'll let you know what's going to be covered in the presentation. But last workshop, there were a lot of questions about the outreach plan and how we're communicating this with the customers. So today we'll kind of start off with more coverage on how we're communicating this with the customers. So we've got a few slides on that, so be patient. There are a lot of slides in the presentation. If you thumb through it today, there's something like 40 slides in there. So there's a lot of detail. We'll try and go as fast as we can. Like we said, we will take a 5-minute break somewhere in the middle of the presentation. We'll come back and we'll take public comment again at that point, see if there's any additional comments that are made, and then we'll finish up the presentation. So with that, we got a lot to cover. So let's get rolling. Let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Rod so he can start walking us through the presentation. Rod Lamont, our CFO.
Thank you, Craig. Members of our board members, staff, and members of the public that are attending this session. This slide here is our workshop agenda. Basically, these are the things that we're going to be covering in this workshop. We've mentioned goals. We've mentioned, that this is the second workshop. The first one was on the 22nd of February, and so this is the second one. We need to and will address in this workshop the questions that came out of the previous workshop. We've got some time for that. And as you look down here to item 6, non-residential customer bill impacts, that's what this session is really all about. The first session was the residential side. Now we're dealing with the non-residential side, with the exception of Marietta Sewer, which was deferred out of the first meeting to the second meeting. And then lastly, the fixed system charge was a question that came up during the first session. As was explained at the beginning of the first session a couple of weeks ago, that the rate setting process began with the adoption of the budget in June of last year. In June, we said that to balance the budget, we would need to have increased revenues from our customers. And so at the time, we were looking at, we needed a roughly around $150,000 in additional revenue for our Marietta service area. This is water only. And on the Riverside side, we needed roughly $650,000 again on the water side. So that's what the budget process revealed, is that we had gaps between expenditures and revenue. And so the proposal in the first workshop and these continuing workshops is how to address the need for additional revenue from the customers. So we can go to the next slide quickly. Just some guidelines. We have 2 hours to complete this. We have subject matter experts certainly available for this call as questions come up. There will be plenty of opportunity for public comment. We had opening remarks from the public, but at break points and different points in this presentation, we'll bring back up whether or not the public would like to comment on something. And lastly, this is being recorded, this meeting, and it'll be posted to our website. Next slide, please. I won't spend any time on this because Tammy already spent the time on it, and Craig. So they indicated how long we have for public comment. And then the helpful tips at the bottom of the slide. You're going to see this again, members of the public, as we break out to public input sessions. Next slide. And so just kind of concluding in terms of goals again, we need to really, certainly will address the questions coming from the first presentation. Just a reminder, this is really about the non-residential customers. And just a little on that, in that first session, when we were talking about the residential customers, and I mentioned that with the water customers, in particular Riverside, that we were dealing with in that first session, revenue needs for about 75% of our potable water usage. So when you look at our retail customers in Riverside, 75%, they use 75% of the potable usage in the Riverside service area. Of course, the others being commercial, etc. And just a reminder, we do have one more scheduled workshop. This is an evening workshop at 6 p.m. on March 22nd. Next slide, please. So these are the questions that came from the first workshop. There were a number of questions about our outreach plan details, the approach that we're going to be taking. We had a question about multifamily residential accounts in the proportion of multifamily versus just pure residential. We had questions about water sources and cost because those water sources and their cost are in the budget, and they're certainly part of the costs that we need to deal with as far as making sure that we have appropriate rates. We have the non-water cost growth assumptions. So a question was asked, hey, besides the water cost, what else is going up and how much is it going up by? We did have a question on the bond ratings, which we'll be getting into. And that question really has to do with the stronger the rating, what is the debt service load, and how much do we really save our customers by having a higher credit rating. And lastly, we did have a question, I believe it was from Director Rizvi, about the wholesale customer rate adoption timeline. And I think that came out of a context about the city of Corona. So with that, let's get into the next slide. And I'd like to bring Sarah on, and she's going to address some of the planned outreach and questions that came out of the first session. Sarah?
Great, thank you, Rod. Just doing a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me? I see
Yes, we can
nods.
hear you.
Yes, Sarah.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, directors, customers, and members of the public. During the last workshop, staff heard interest from the board to understand more details about our outreach, active and planned, for this rate proposal. So I'm here today to share this information. As you know, at Western, we are prioritizing outreach and really working to enhance transparency and staying focused on improving customer access to information, especially when a decision brings direct impacts. Next slide for me. You did hear during the last workshop that a comprehensive, multifaceted outreach effort has been established to make sure our communication remains transparent, consistent, accurate, to really adequately inform and educate our customers. Today, I am going to briefly summarize our outreach goals that you heard last session. I'll review our detailed outreach efforts, and lastly, I'll highlight some important upcoming dates. Next slide. This outreach effort that we are active in will focus on ensuring that you, as our Western's board, our customers, and our stakeholders have an opportunity to provide input and really be heard. We want customers to know where to get information and know who to contact with their questions. Ultimately, our goals are to establish an understanding of the proposal and process for offering input through proactive communication with customer support and offer information with transparency and accessibility. With any outreach effort, it also means that there could be more customer attention on the topic. So this program is not necessarily designed to guarantee specific outcomes in terms of number of comments, whether those be positive, neutral, or negative. But instead, success will really look like hearing from our customers that they were informed, had broad-based awareness for the goals and the process, including how to participate, and that our customers are taking advantage of those information opportunities. Success to me will be an increased understanding for our future funding needs here at Western, and that the rates proposed are necessary, justifiable, and equitable. And lastly, that you, our board, have the information you need to make a decision. Next slide. As you heard during our last workshop, our outreach does far exceed Prop 218 requirements, and I did share at a high level what tactics we are using, and you see those here listed on the screen. I'm about to run through the details of each of these tactics, listing all of the tools that we're using, and it is quite a list. So as I run through this list, I'm going to do my best to point out what items are already in place. And we do have a lot of content to get to today, so I will run through this rather quickly, but I'll be on the line through the duration of the workshop, so I'm ready to answer any questions that you might have after this presentation. Next slide. So part of our digital outreach does include social media outreach. Social media, oh, I skipped ahead a little bit, so I'll back up. We do have a series of board workshops. This is workshop number 3 of 3, and board meetings. So you see those listed here on the screen. These are the events that are specifically involving the board's education, opportunities for customers to participate and hear information. And you'll see some dates a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide. So as mentioned, as part of our digital outreach, we use several tools digitally. We know customers are online, they're connected on their phones, and so we need to meet them where they are. That does include social media. We're active on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And we are providing information there consistently, accurately, and timely, posted to those platforms. We're using paid advertisements for maximum reach. This is really low budget when I say paid advertisements, and that's really because Facebook and social media algorithms demand that, and we want to make sure our customers are seeing this content. We're posting meetings and content in Facebook events as groups and engaging with those groups that are allowing us. It's really important to know that social media is only one of many tools, and like tools, each have their own limitations. I've mentioned, we're kind of beholden to the algorithms of those platforms in terms of how often our customers are seeing our content. There's free speech issues. Some of the groups are closed and have expectations of privacy and actually aren't looking for Western to participate in those. Other open groups do require approval of our content and posts, which can sometimes result in delayed information sharing, limitations on our response. We also have to consider FPPC requirements. Plus, there's a constant content stream, so it's really easy for content to get lost or buried on these platforms. So as I mentioned, each tool comes with its pros and cons, which is why we really have applied a variety of tools for this process so that we are reaching customers where they are, but also in multiple ways. Not everybody's on social media, as we know. Next slide. In addition to social media, one of our core tools is our website. This really is the bread and butter of our outreach, and we are, for this effort, having a one-stop shop webpage for this program. It's listed there on the screen, where customers can have access to all of the information. This webpage is live now and will be updated regularly throughout this process as information becomes available. We're also going to be providing access to this content through our homepage with graphics, with calendar alerts, news releases, so it will be really easy to find for customers who visit WMWD.com. We're launching a customer online survey this week so that to offer just another way to provide input on this process and what's being proposed. We'll be providing frequently answers to frequently asked questions online. Also in print, we'll have email campaigns, which launched already. So we've already launched emails promoting this workshop, e-bill messages, billing envelopes, billing inserts, billing posts. So those are all active as we speak. And we'll be launching 2 educational videos. Next slide. In addition to our digital communications, we also know customers still need that print in-hand information. So we have a series of tools scheduled and already active to provide information mailed directly to customers' homes, right where they are. We're offering direct mail postcards promoting our customer information sessions. As I mentioned, we'll have inserts in the bill. We know this is one of the main ways customers prefer to receive information. There'll be messages posted directly on their bill and a customized bill envelope, so it makes it really hard to miss this information. We'll also be mailing the mandatory Prop 218 public notice hearing, which will be customized by service area and mailed out 45 days in advance of a public hearing should the board move to set that public hearing. Next slide. In addition to our other tactics, we are also offering multicultural outreach. We know that about 38% of our population is Spanish speaking. So many of those print communications that I mentioned will also be offered in Spanish. That includes our public hearing notice, our bill inserts and postcards. Our website and social media do have translation features, along with offering translation services for meetings upon request. And we do have staff available to support any Spanish speakers who do give us a call or need more information. Next slide. Media relations is another tactic we are using. We have a planned news release schedule based on key milestones and announcements. Our first news release about the project posted last week following workshop number 1, sharing that we hosted workshop number 1 and have a series of workshops and other opportunities to get information and provide input. That's being shared with local reporters, and Western staff are standing by should there be any interest in picking up these stories and sharing this information. We're also following it promptly to any media inquiries that do pop up for us. To date, we have not had any specific follow-ups, but we're continuing to be in contact with our local reporters that we have relationships with. Next slide. Through our customer support program, we've activated an internal multi-departmental customer support team. This is made up of staff who often are on the front lines of receiving customer questions and calls. We want those teams to be aware of this program, what the main details are, and able to directly respond to avoid passing customers along through a phone tree, which can be frustrating. We're sharing key project information through these teams, offering frequently asked questions, and making sure that these responses are offered factually and timely. We do have a goal of responding to customers within 2 business days, if not sooner. Next slide. Our outreach also does include civic stakeholder outreach. We know we have a lot of civic stakeholders. These are our counties, cities within our service area that will be interested and indirectly affected. So we're hosting one-on-one briefings with those interested, kicking off this month and going through April and May. You can see some of those groups on your slide there. Next slide. I'm moving on to slide 19 for those who might not be following along on their video. Slide 19 speaks to non-residential customer outreach. We know while a majority of our impacted customers are residential, those who are in homes and multifamily residences, but we also have non-residential customers. So we're directly sending letters to those in our top 35 water and sewer user categories, and then also offering one-on-one briefings and meetings with staff so that they can get more information. And these will start taking place beginning in April, but the letters are going out this month. Next slide. We are offering additional direct residential customer outreach. So as we close this series of these workshops and move to a more final proposal, if that's directed by the board, we're hosting 3 residential customer information sessions. You see the dates listed on your screen on slide 20. We're offering 2 sessions for Riverside, one in the morning on Thursday, April 22nd, and one in the evening, so that customers who may be able to attend different times have that option. And then of course we have our Murrieta service area on Wednesday, April 28th at 6 p.m. And this information will be shared again on a later slide. We're also offering community group presentations in April and May. These are community groups hosted by other agencies that we're often participating in, attending on a monthly basis. And we're going to share this information at those groups as well. Next slide. So I wanted to just recap. I know that's a lot of information sending your way. We're using a comprehensive, multifaceted way to get information to our customers and to make sure they know how they can provide input and offer feedback. So some key important upcoming dates would be that workshop number 3 on Monday, March 22nd at 6 p.m. That'll be with the board. We're going to also be pending board direction, ensuring those public notices make it to customers by that April 15th date, and then hosting those customer informational sessions that I just mentioned on the last slide, getting letters in hands of our stakeholders and non-residential customers, along with offering those briefings March through May, and then potentially having a board meeting to set a public hearing in April, following up with an official public hearing in June. Next slide for me. So with that, that really wraps up the multifaceted outreach. I hope you can see it's comprehensive and helps bring a little bit of understanding for how customers are really going to have the opportunity to get information and share input. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our financial analyst, Daisy Vanuelos, who will be offering a summary of our previous workshops.
Thank you, Sarah. Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
go ahead,
we can
Daisy.
hear you.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So like Sarah just mentioned, I will now provide a recap of the information that was shared in the first workshop a few weeks ago. Next slide, please. So I am now on slide 23. I presented this slide in our first rate workshop a few weeks ago, and this presented the results of performing a cost of service study. And this information that was shared a few weeks ago is the year-over-year increase in an average month's water bill for a median residential customer. As a reminder, in Riverside, this would be 2.1% for the first year, which is the lowest bill impact we have proposed since 1988, and is lower than what we had projected during the budget process. For years 2, 3, and 4, respectively, the monthly bill would increase 3.5%, 4.1%, and 4.4%. On the table, we also show the dollar impact per month for the median residential bill. The reason why the first year adjustment impact is lower than what was presented during the budget is mainly due to assumption refinements in our cost of supply. An example being that during the budget process, we had not secured the Elsinore lease agreement, and now we can incorporate that as part of our supply. In Murrieta, the percent bill impact per month for the median residential customer would be 2.2% for the first year, which is also the lowest increase in recent years. We are able to present low rate increases due to the continuing to rely on our local well water quantities, which are at a much lower cost than purchasing water from Eastern. For years 2, 3, and 4, respectively, the monthly bill would increase 4.4%, 4.2%, and 4.1% in order to keep pace with the rising cost of water supplies from Eastern Municipal Water District. For Rainbow, the percent bill impact per month for the median residential customer would be 3.5% for the first and second year, and then 4.5% for the third and fourth year. Next slide, please. Slide number 24. Again, this is a reminder from the first rate workshop for the sewer bill impacts. And so as a result of performing a cost of service analysis on the La Sierra and Western Water Recycling Facility service area, we have determined these year-over-year increases in an average month's sewer bill. The La Sierra service area and Western Water Recycling Facility service area, the percent increase would be 3% annually for the 4 years of the proposed rate plan. This is lower than was projected back during the budget process as well. Again, the table shows the monthly sewer rate increase in dollars as well for the proposed 4 years.
And Daisy, this is Rod, just to make a comment about something that was said in the first workshop, and which is very important, is this is the first time that we had been proposing rates for 4 years. And as was said in the first workshop, in the past, we didn't have that ability because we lacked certain tools, but we acquired those tools. So we use some fairly sophisticated projection software now called Scenario. And as you've learned through our capital budgeting, we've gotten far better at actually budgeting for capital purposes and doing that in a long range fashion now. So that gives us the ability to look out longer and to fix rates. We think that's great for our customers because there's predictability solidly for the next 4 years. We also know that those that rely on our financial statements, underwriters, rating agencies, et cetera, anytime that you can project certainty for something like 4 years on your rates, that sends a strong signal to them that we have the systems, the financial stability, the know-how to predict our rate future. So I wanted to emphasize that because this is important going 4 years out. So Daisy, back to you.
Thank you, Rod. And now on the next slide, I'll hand it off to Kevin to provide other responses to questions from the first workshop.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kevin Mascaro, Director of Finance here at Western. Let's go to the next slide. There's a question about our multifamily residential accounts. Those could include apartments and condominiums and things like that. And the request was how many accounts or customers do we have both in the Riverside and Murrieta service area? So we put that here on a slide. We have only 4 in the Riverside area. In fact, they're mainly near our previous headquarters. That's that very small map on the lower left side. There's 3 clustered together and 1 a little bit further away, but there's 4. And those 4 represent 3% of the total water demand in the Riverside potable service area. And then in Murrieta, there's more, 14, that's the larger map. And those 14 multifamily residential accounts represent about 8% of the annual demand. want to make sure if that answered the question. I think Director Gardner, you may have asked that, or if anyone else did, if there's any clarification needed, please let us know. All righty, then let's move ahead on to the next slide. This was another question asked from the first workshop. What are the sources and cost in our Riverside potable service area? And you can see we have 4 sources. The one we talk a lot about is Metropolitan Water District. About 2/3 of the total volume to supply our customers come from them. We talk about them a lot because you can see the rate per acre foot is much higher than the local supplies. No surprise, the water comes from a very long distance. Riverside Public Utilities has some water that they own. It's surplus water that they sell us. We also have Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District. This is fairly new in a way. It's been a recent agreement with Elsinore, but I'm going to come back to that source in just a moment. And then you may recall too that we purchased rights in the Meeks and Daily Water Company, 227 acre feet. Now, that asterisk on the Elsinore Valley, let me read that there. Proceeds from the sale of Mills Gravity Line capacity rights to Elsinore Valley have been used as an offset to this rate. Now, this is very important. So I want to spend a few minutes explaining this to make sure that the board of directors understands what staff is recommending to help keep the tier 1 rate as low as possible. So previously, Western was using about 4,200 acre feet of Elsinore Valley's Meeks and Daily potable water under a reciprocal use agreement. And we've had that with Elsinore since about 2001. What that means is we received these molecules, 4,200 acre feet of water, in exchange for Western providing Elsinore with capacity in the Mills Gravity Line. So in other words, it was this equal transfer, no cash. They didn't bill us for the molecules. We didn't bill them for using the gravity line. They had to pay for the water they sent down the gravity line, but they didn't have to pay for the service right, which is very different than others. And so this was an even exchange that had been negotiated a long time ago. Well, now this exchange agreement ended when Elsinore purchased those service rights in the Mills Gravity Line for $13.6 million. And then therefore, as a consequence, right, Western is now being billed for the Meeks and Daily water. This is about almost $200 an acre foot. Under both situations, whether it was through the exchange agreement or us buying the molecules directly, Riverside Public Utilities, RPU, would wheel that water through their system. So in order to keep the proposed local water costs as low as possible, here's what staff is recommending. That the board approve temporarily using the use of the capacity sale proceeds, that $13.6 million, to offset the commodity costs, now this new commodity cost, due and payable to Elsinore. And the board has complete authority to use those proceeds as they deem best. It's very similar to property tax revenue, very similar to interest earnings on investments. The board has that discretion to do so. Now, the subsidy of the water supply rate in the first year is $138, but it grows to about $220 by the end of the 4-year period, $226 by the end of the 4-year rate setting period. So basically, this is a subsidy over the 4-year rate setting period, $3.7 million. Now hear this, without this subsidy, that $671 you see in row 3, that would be $809 per acre foot. And instead of the median residential customer in Riverside having that 2.1% bill impact in year 1, it would become 3.9%. Right? So 1.8% difference. So very, very substantial. Now, since the 13.6 million will eventually run out, this topic will need to be addressed. Most likely in the, after this 4-year rate setting period, it would be need to be addressed in that next period. But for now, staff is recommending this approach to keep the tier 1 rate over the next 4 years as low as possible. That was a lot to cover, but I want to make sure if there's any questions that staff could address them now. Okay, well then we'll forge ahead. This one, I believe, again, was a question asked in the last session. What is our assumption for Metropolitan Water District rates over the next 4 fiscal years, which is our 4-year rate setting horizon? And Metropolitan, what they do, their board adopts 2 calendar year rates at a time. Excuse me. So they've adopted 2021 and 2022. So how do we get the future years? Well, when they do adopt rates, which they did in 2020, they also develop a 10-year financial forecast. And so basically they say, here's our best shot at what we think will be the Metropolitan Water District, what's called the treated Tier 1 rate. And what we do, since we're on a fiscal year basis for our rates, at least that's what we're proposing, we need to convert those calendar year rates of Metropolitan into fiscal year rates. And I won't bore you with all the weighted average calculation that we do, but basically we don't have the same amount of water delivered in the first half of the year as the second half of the year. And those, so there's the fiscal year. So there's different rates that get applied in a weighted manner. But these are what we're looking at. So you can see anywhere from 2.8%, which was really good news when Metropolitan's board approved a lower rate increase. Some of you may recall that through a lot of conversations. They had a lower rate, but then of course they're returning back to their more normal 4 to 5%, over time. I want to pause here and see. Well, actually, let me go one more slide because this is the other part of it. I didn't get to Marietta. Here we are for Marietta water sources. Eastern, which you see is very expensive. It's even higher than the Metropolitan rate because they have to add on their own system cost. In other words, their wheeling rate to wheel that water through their system. So a dramatic difference between $287 for groundwater, pumping it out of ground, getting it chemically treated for drinking water, all the labor and all the costs, all the maintenance of those wells, et cetera, but still a much lower cost. But I'm thrilled to say, frankly, that 1,452 acre feet of groundwater, that's the most I think we've had legitimately in the rate model in a long time. We probably have crossed our fingers hoping we would get that amount. But now with the completion of that new North Well number 2, that's the amount of volume of water we're looking to get from that groundwater. To give you a comparison, without that well, you just have the new clay well, which is just under 400 acre feet per year. So that new North Well is a significant addition that Western has done to help the Marietta service area have the lowest water rates possible. I'll pause here because that concludes at least a section on water sources and their cost. Did that answer the question that was addressed brought up in the previous workshop? All righty, well then let's move on to the next slide. I'm going to turn this back over to Rod.
Got to unmute. It helps if people can hear you when you actually unmute. Thank you, Kevin. Another question that came up, and it's this slide here addresses it, is besides the cost of water, what are the assumptions with the other cost components in terms of their growth and the impact on rates? And so that other assumption is 4.5% was used. You come down to the little sub-bullet below it, 4.5% was used for O&M, except of course for purchased water. And Kevin has just taken us through the purchased water side. You heard something from Daisy in the first session about how we had a power study done. And so we have actual power projection costs now. And the asset replacement growth, which is our asset replacement reserves, are scheduled to grow about 5%, not the 4.5%. And we ended up actually adjusting the debt service schedule that had been adopted when the budget was put in place, because later, as we found, we had a successful offering in the debt service cost came in lower than what had been used inside the budget. So a little bit on this 4.5%. It's the assumption for the 4 years. There is no increase in headcount contemplated by this. And the 4.5% isn't just the difference, let's say, between maybe what we paid for something last year and we're having to pay for something the same this next year, meaning that we got a bill for 4.5% more. The 4.5% also accounts for our increased activity that departments have over time. So that increased activity, let me give you an example of increased activity. Take regulatory, for example. If we were to go back to the last rate setting exercise that really began 4 years ago, PFOA and PFOS wasn't even on the horizon for us, and we weren't spending a lot of effort in that regard. We do now, and we have people involved in it. We're collaborating with other agencies, and we're also using some resources of specialty consultants and special legal. So that's an example of how things change, that on the regulatory side, just with the example of PFAS and PFOA, you've got increased workload happening. More recently, we've heard about information technology and security challenges. And I can tell you as the CFO, because IT reports up to me, that over the course of the last couple of years, we're spending more money on IT security, trying to stay ahead of something that's very difficult to stay ahead of. For you, I guess I can use a hockey analogy. It's almost like if you have an IT function like we have, our IT group is like the goalie in net, and we're getting all these slap shots thrown at us that are these security challenges. And so we've talked about that. But my point about the 4.5% is we're spending a lot more on IT security, and primarily we're doing it with the use of third-party consultants to help us in the risk assessment area and in the monitoring area. The important thing again about 4.5%, it isn't just the price increases on things. It's our activity levels have changed and do change. And 4.5, where we got it from, is going back, looking at recent budgets, the last one, the one before that, and 4.5% has been kind of our constant growth pattern for O&M expenses. So with that, the next slide, I believe, is 31, Spencer. And we did have a question regarding debt service and our credit rating. And now we asked this information as of February of this year. So they didn't go back to July when we actually had, of last year when we had the bond issue. But looking at market conditions, we're a AA rating, and they looked at February and they said we would probably land at 2.91%, and 152 million would be our total debt service over the lifetime of the debt issuance. And you can see by moving to the left, if we're a AAA, we would save, meaning our customers would save $2 million over the life of a 30-year debt issue by maintaining a strong credit rating. And if we were to fall from the AA over to a single A, you can see in the far right column the added debt service load that comes from having a lower credit rating. And I guess just lastly on credit ratings, one of our core values of the district is fiscal responsibility and value. And we think maintaining that credit rating delivers value for our customers in the debt service savings. So with that, I think, Kevin, I turn it back over to you, I believe.
Yes, great. Thank you, Craig, or Rod.
Well, thanks for calling me Craig.
Yeah, I should try to get my boss's name correct on occasion. Anyway, let's go to the next slide, Spencer, if you would. Just a little bit of education here. We refer to wholesale customers as other water agencies. That could be the city's water department. It could be another special district like Western. And we refer to the non-wholesale customers as our retail customers, those that we sell the water directly to through pipes and pump stations and tanks and so forth. And so a question was asked last time about wholesale rates, outreach, and timing. And so we wanted to really quickly address that. Western has 8 wholesale customers. It's Rancho California Water District, cities of Corona and Norco, Elsinore Valley, Temescal Valley, Grupo Community Services District, Eagle Valley, and Box Springs. And so those 8, we sell Metropolitan Water District to. They all have turnouts where they're able to wheel it to themselves through a Metropolitan turnout. And so we bill them the cost that Metropolitan charges us. And then we add on a small administrative charge to facilitate all that. We also do sell the city of Norco and Corona desalter water from the Arlington desalter. However, it's way at the bottom of the hill. And so if we were to bring that water up here into our Riverside service area, it would cost more than Metropolitan water. And we don't want to charge our customers more than the cheapest source of water, the least expensive source of water that we can obtain. So that desalter water is down at the bottom of the hill and it's sold to other agencies. And that's how that works there too. We do notify our wholesale customers about rates that become effective July 1, our admin charge, the Mills Gravity Line maintenance charge, the readiness to serve charge, as well as the rates that are effective January 1, which is all other Metropolitan's other rates. So hopefully that answered the question. So what we're doing in this workshop, the last workshop and the upcoming one, is not about our wholesale customers at all. It's about our retail customers. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the, we received 3 formal written questions from the public regarding, in response to the first workshop. I'm the one that'll take the very first one here. So let me just dive right into it. The question is, this is slide 33. Why are Orange Crest, and it's referring to a neighborhood in Riverside, why are Orange Crest rates higher than other Western customers? So I like to answer that by saying in the Riverside service area where Orange Crest is, all drinking water customers are subject to the very same rate schedules. These customers pay the same rates for water and for the water reliability charge. All customers as well are subject to the same rate schedule for the system charge and the Metropolitan Water District readiness to serve charge, both of which are based on the size of the meter serving the property. So there's a single rate schedule for the fixed system charge, the readiness to serve charge. There's the same rate schedule for the water, same amount for the water reliability charge for all customers in the Riverside service area. Now, customers will see a variation in the pumping charge rate because that's based on regional zones that reflect the amount of energy needed to bring the water into that zone. So the higher and further away a zone is from the water source, the higher the pumping charge rate. Now, just in case this question had related to maybe comparing Riverside rates with Murrieta, Western does have separate rate schedules for the Riverside and Murrieta service areas, since the cost to deliver water is very different, as we saw from that water supply source and cost slide. It's very different for these 2 distinct regions. And so these 2 areas, there's a separate fund for each of them. And when we perform a cost of service study, we don't join those 2 funds together. We keep those service areas completely separate for equity purposes so that the customer only pays the costs associated with providing service to their area. And then I'll turn it over, let me see here, I believe it's to Craig for the second question.
Yeah, I'll give that a shot, Kevin. Thank you. So we get this question a lot, so I'm glad we're addressing it. We get it on social media all the time. We've had it our rate workshops in the past. Why are Western's rates higher than Riverside Public Utilities and Eastern Municipal Water District? So this is all about location and water supply. It's very hard for, I think, customers to understand. They hear about someone in RPU's service area and their bill is less than ours. Well, that totally makes sense. If Spencer, could you go back to, I think it was slide 27? Yeah, so our water supply for Western's retail customers in the Riverside area comes from these 4 supplies. And you can see these supplies range from $1,100 an acre foot to $619 an acre foot. The huge difference here is our Riverside service area does not have any groundwater underneath our feet. We've got to acquire water supply from others. Now, we've done a really good job in the last 5 years because 5 years ago, we were basically 100% metropolitan water. So we've entered into an agreement with Riverside, with Elsinore, and acquired groundwater rights. Those groundwater rights we acquired from Meeks and Daly are not under our own feet. They're in San Bernardino. So that water all has to be moved through other entities' systems to get to us. So go one more slide, please, Spencer, to 28 to see the cost differential. No, go one more. I'm looking for the Murrieta cost. There we go. So look at, yeah, that's it. No, one more. Thank you. So look at the groundwater costs. So assuming that RPU has groundwater underneath their feet, just like the Murrieta service area does, we supply that water to our customers for about $287 an acre foot. That's the difference, is RPU is able to serve water supply to their customers that starts at $287 or some number there, close to that. And we're having to acquire it from outside the region. So that's it. Spencer, you can go back to the main slide. Thank you. So, you know, other people have asked, well, then why doesn't RPU serve our area? Well, that's an easy answer too. And RPU, long ago, this is back in the 50s, the decision was made that RPU did not have enough water and could not push water up the hill to the Riverside service area. And that's why Western was formed, to bring water into the area. So if RPU somehow was going to take over the area, they would have to then be acquiring all that external supply. So they'd be buying water from Met, and they'd be buying water from San Bernardino, and they would be paying the same water supply costs that Western's paying. So they would then have to raise their RPU rates to accommodate that. And they made a decision decades ago that they weren't going to do that, and Western was formed to import water to the region. Eastern's very similar. Eastern has a lot of groundwater under their service area, but their costs are a little higher because they have to desalt a lot of that water to serve their customers. So every agency has different water supply mixes. They have different physical constraints to their service areas. They have different elevation changes. So it's different for every agency. So it's not good to compare one agency to another agency because their baseline circumstances for water supply and operational costs are totally different. So hopefully that helps the submitter of that question, but it's a really important question because we get it all the time, and I understand why it's difficult for the average customer to understand that. So with that, let's go to question number 3. How does Western's water budget account for unseasonably warm weather that impacts our water bill? And we heard that from one of our questions today. So Tim, can you address that one?
Absolutely. Happy to address that. Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Great. It's important to note that residential water budgets have 2 parts. They've got an indoor component and an outdoor component. The indoor component is based on the number of occupants in the home. If a customer has 4 people living in their home, then they get a budget for all 4 people. If they have 6 occupants, they get an indoor budget for 6 occupants. The indoor budget is provided for every single day and therefore expands and contracts to meet the changes in longer and shorter monthly billing periods. The indoor budget is added to the outdoor budget. The outdoor budget is calculated using 3 factors: the size of the landscape, the daily changes in weather, and the University of California Riverside crop requirement for turf grass. Turf grass is another word for lawn. The outdoor budget is calculated every day based on the unique size of a customer landscape. A larger landscape requires more water than a smaller one, and thus gets more water in the budget. The daily weather is updated, and in fact, each water service account is assigned to one of more than 450 unique weather microclimates. This is done because weather conditions can vary across the service area. Weather might be different in Orange Crest than it is in the Gavilan Hills area. The weather data is provided by HydroPoint Data Systems of Petaluma, California, and every day it's added to our billing system. If a day in winter is unseasonably warm, then the budget will expand to provide more water because the data is provided every single day for every one of those unique microzones. The UC crop factor is fixed for every month. It does not change. It provides enough water for lawns to thrive. As most landscapes are a mix of grass and shrubs and trees, the budget is enough for all plants to thrive. The daily water budgets are added together, both indoor and outdoor, for every single day for the total number of days in the monthly billing period. So I think we're moving on to the next slide.
Yeah, so Tim, Tim, that's a lot of detail. So just to kind of summarize that detail, if there is an unseasonably warm period in the middle of January, a customer is not punished because it's unseasonably warm. They're actually given more water in their budget to accommodate that warm spell. And so there's no budget water supply impact to the customer.
That's absolutely correct. They expand as the weather gets warmer.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Tim. So why don't we this is kind of a natural break in the presentation before we get into kind of the new topics for today. So let's take a 5-minute break. It's 2:05 right now. We will start up again at 10 minutes after 2. All right, it's 10 after. We'll take roll in just a second. Checking for directors. I don't see President Denstedt's video on again.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Director Rizvi. Director Torres, no video. Are you listening back on? Are you on?
I'm on.
Thank you. All right, Director Denstedt is back. I see Mike, Director Gardner. Tammy, can you take roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Director Galliano.
Yes, I still have a pulse.
Thank you. Glad to hear that. Director Rizvi.
I'm here.
Director Gardner.
I don't really have a pulse. I'm awake.
Wonderful. Director Torres.
I'm here.
Thank you. President Denstedt.
I am here. Thank you very much, Tammy.
Thank you. President Denstedt, you have a quorum.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Director Denstedt, I think this is the time when we're going to try and take questions again. So at this point, we'll take a quick survey. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make public comment at this point? Same rules apply as before, 3 minutes of public comment. Please raise your hand, or if you're having trouble figuring out how to raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, you can just speak up and we'll identify you and give you 3 minutes. Is there any public comment at this point?
Craig, I see none.
Okay.
Before we do get started, can I get a head count of how many members of the public are actually on here?
Tammy, can you tell?
Yes, Director Torres, in total, we have had 6 customers. We currently have 4 online.
Okay. Thank
you, Tammy.
I'm not hearing any questions, so let's move on. On the agenda, go to the bill impacts slide, please, Spencer. And I'll turn it back over to Kevin. Let's skip that
Greg.
one.
All right, next slide.
There you go.
I do apologize. There's so many numbers on this slide, but I will very carefully walk you through it and just hit the highlights.
Can I interrupt you for just a second? I'm getting a little bit of an echo on my end, so I don't know if somebody's got their mic on that they can mute because we're getting a little bit echoed. Thank you. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Director. So let me walk you through what this slide is attempting to communicate. It's of course titled The Average Bill Impact for Non-Residential Customers in the Riverside Service Area. Don't worry, Director Denstedt, we'll get Marietta on the next workshop. But we could only do so many of these slides compressed with data at a time. So on the left, you have the various different customer types, residential, commercial, landscape, et cetera. Then you have the number of customers, really the number of connections, right? The number of meters we have, and the percent of water demand from those customer types. So if you look on that number of customers column, 95% of the customers are residential. Okay, so 95% of the connections of the meters are residential, but they only produce or have a water demand of 61%. So the other 39% comes from 5% of our customers, which is all the non-residential. And that's what those first 2 columns are meant to communicate. Now the next column, meter size, it's not like all commercial customers have a 1-inch meter. No, not at all. What we're trying to accomplish in this slide is, okay, what's the most common meter size for a commercial or an ag potable customer? Okay, a 1-inch. All right. Now, let's look at the average monthly usage for a 1-inch commercial meter. And let's look at the current rates. If they were to use the exact same water as last year, what would be their new bill impact in year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4? Now you see with that 8.2% for commercial in year 1, that kind of stands out. And you may be saying, well, what about the 2.1% impact for residential customers that Daisy showed us a few slides back? I'm going to explain why, and it will take a little bit of time, but it's worth understanding the explanation. Now, 8.2%, kind of a large number, right? it translates when you move a couple columns over into year one, the dollar impact per month is $23. Okay. But if you're, for example, what if you're a really, really large water user? Okay, well, then you would have a, maybe if you had an 8% impact, that would be, of course, an even larger dollar amount. But again, when you look at the 1 inch, 2 inch, 1.5 inch meters for commercial, you're going to see generally the vast majority of commercial customers will see somewhere between a 5% and an 8% impact to their bill. And you're looking at those kind of dollar amounts. Now, let me give you some background. Okay. The year one column, right? When you look down the year one column percentages, I'm seeing all sorts of different numbers, quite a range there. Okay. And this is the result of a variety of changes being proposed by staff to enhance customer equity and ensure long-term financial stability. The most significant impact of all the changes that we're proposing is in Riverside's service area, Tier 1 water budget rate. Okay, and that's really critical because it affects all Riverside potable customers, whether you are on water budget rates or not. And I'm going to explain why. Now, Spencer, let's bring up that first slide in the other file. This is not in the packet, and it's something that we created for another presentation. I thought, wow, this would be really helpful to have here. So this is the separate file of extra slides. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And we titled it, Why Does the Year 1 Increase Look So Much Different? I'm going to just talk about the first bullet for now, so don't be tempted to start reading through the whole slide, all right? The first bullet, the temporary subsidy used to offset a portion of the capital recovery component in Riverside Public Utilities wheeling rate has been discontinued in our proposed rates. That only affects the Tier 1 rate. Now, do not get confused. You may recall earlier I was talking about how we have proceeds from the sale of capacity in the Mills Gravity Line to Elsinore Valley. And we're suggesting, hey, now that they've bought their capacity and they're going to start billing us for water, let's use those proceeds to offset that cost of water. That's something totally brand new. And that's what's built into the rate model. We're taking proceeds from the sale, using them to now pay for water that we no longer get at no charge as a result of that sale. This is something different. Back in 2000, let me give you the history. It's important. In 2016, Western's board decided not to increase 2015's water rates. Why? Because of the drought situation that was going on at that time. So later in 2016, staff began formulating rates for calendar year 2017. All right, we're going to skip 2016. Let's go to 17. The presentation of the board was not well received, putting it nicely, because the proposed increase was 9% in the first year and about 3% in the second year for a total of 12%. That 9% proposed increase back then was due to skipping raising any rates in 2016. So after a series of workshops, the board directed staff to spread this large increase over a 3-year period. Where staff was proposing a 2, they said, hey, look, spread that 12% over the 3 years, over 3 years. And then so that was what staff did. And after some more workshops and a postponement of the public hearing that we had planned in early 2017 due to the recently signed wheeling and surplus water agreement between Western and the city of Riverside, the board asked specifically that the median residential customer impact in Riverside would not exceed 5.5% for the 3-year rate setting period. But unfortunately, by this time, we had missed setting rates completely in 2017, not only 16, but 17. And there was a lot of catching up to do. Whenever you don't do something one year, you got to make it up in the next year, and it makes it that much harder. So to achieve the targeted percentage impact that the board of directors approved, what they did is they approved using Water Reliability Fund revenue. Okay, Water Reliability Fund revenue to pay about half of the capital costs in RPU's wheeling rate for calendar years 2018, 19, and 20. This was done again in order to achieve that 5.5% median residential bill impact for each of the 3 rate setting years, and meant that all local water wheeled by Western through RPU system would be subsidized by about $165 an acre foot, pretty significant. Now, what is that Water Reliability Fund? That fund collects revenue from the 42 cents per billing unit applied to all water in the Riverside service area. What is that water reliability charge used for? It's used to pay capital costs related to agency, interties, and new water sources. So it was a good use of that money, but the board and staff had talked about using that revenue for new water supply sources. So basically, the board was saying, look, for these next 3 years, let's temporarily use that water liability fund money and help offset the high cost in our local water because we skipped 2016 to 2017. What kind of dollars are we talking about? $1.4 million a year, or $4.2 million over the 3 years of the adopted rates. Now, for context, 1.4 million is about a third of all the annual revenue we receive from the water reliability charge. It's also worth noting that the Water Reliability Fund is the source for paying all the financing costs for Western's share of the Chino de Salto Authority expansion and for the La Sierra Pipeline Sterling Pump Station projects. So basically, some of those, the workings of all that fund and how it's used were basically kind of put on hold for those 3 years. Now, without this subsidy from the Water Liability Charge Fund, the percentage increase would have been much higher than the board directed, which was at 5.5% per year. This subsidy was meant to be temporary, so it was removed now, starting with the first year of these proposed rates that we're talking about now. As mentioned, this subsidy was using about a third of the revenue coming in, and if continued, would prevent the use of those funds from being used to acquire new local, less expensive water sources. So, pause it. Well, no, I'm not going to pause. I'm just going to keep going. So why, I know you're asking this question, why is the median residential bill only increasing by 2.1% in the first year, whereas this commercial one's increasing by 8.2%? And that's because the increase in the tier 1 rate for residential customers is mostly offset by a reduction in both the fixed system charge rate and the readiness to serve charge rate. Now, later I'll be explaining why the fixed system charge is going down, which I think will make many customers happy, because that one's fixed. It doesn't vary based on the volume of water, so it's going down. The readiness to serve charge is a pass-through for Metropolitan, and it's going down because the amount Metropolitan is charging Western is going down. Now, to give you a real quick example, if your residential commodity charge, that water charge, the water in tiers 1 and 2, if it's going up by, say, $8, okay, because of all I described about removing that subsidy, but your fixed system charge is going down by $6, the net impact is only $2, really low, and that's why we're getting that low percentage. But if you're a commercial customer and you don't have $8 in water, you're a much bigger user, you have $80 in water, but your fixed charge is only going down by the $6, you have a net impact of $74, which is a much higher impact. So I hope that makes sense. And really that percentage is driven for commercial based on the volume of water that they use being much higher than a typical residential customer. The second bullet on the screen that I'm looking at here, we'll probably talk more about in workshop number 3. Basically, the tier 1 and tier 2 width for commercial customers is very different from residential. And it's been adjusted by our policy to reflect the proportionate share of the projected amount of local water available to Western. That's a mouthful. We'll explain that more in the next workshop number 3. But the widths of the tier 1 for commercial customers is shrinking because there's less local water supply than we had in the rate model last time. We were overly optimistic last rate setting period. We can't do that again because that water didn't materialize. Some good news for those in Murrieta, just the opposite is occurring because we actually now have more local water coming in Murrieta. So you'll see that the tier 1 budget for commercial customers expand accordingly. But you have to wait till next time to be able to hear more of that. Let's go back to the slide, Spencer, we were looking at before. Keep this one up though, because I might want to jump back to it. So I'm looking at slide 38. Beautiful. Okay. So I hope that helps explains the, oh, thank you. I hope that helps explain somewhat the commercial 8.2. It's rather complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. Then you look at landscape potable, and I'll be quick with the rest, honest. Landscape potable, landscape non-potable. Non-potable is non-drinkable. Wow, it's going up very low. Why? Because they don't have any tier 1 water. Tier 1 is for either indoor for residential, or it's done by a different formula for commercial. Landscape is all outdoor. So they get all their budget in tier 2, the outdoor budget. And the tier 2 rate is not going up that much. Plus you have the fact that the fixed system charge is dropping. You get those low rates for landscape. Then it starts to be a little more normal after that. Now the landscape non-potable and the ag non-potable, you see in later years, boy, that's taking a jump. Here's why. Western has been, in order to encourage non-potable non-potable water use, in essence, has been applying more property taxes to offset the cost of power or pumping in the non-potable system. And the decision is being proposed by staff that you really can't justify why you're giving those customer types a break. So we're removing that, but because it's such a big jump, because it's been offset for so many years, we're going to phase that in over the 4-year period. What's going on with ag? You see, first year of ag is higher than others. Ag potable is high. A couple things. It started way years and years ago when Metropolitan provided, through their interim agricultural water program, a discounted rate to ag. Now, there was a consequence if you were in that program, but that's for another day. So they got discounted water. Western over time ended up giving agricultural customers a discount. I mean, that's kind of our area. That's our heritage in our area. But because of Proposition 218 and industry standards on how to calculate rates, there's really no justification for giving agricultural customers a discount. We can only charge the cost of providing water service to the various customer types. So what we're doing there is they've been paying less of that water liability charge that I mentioned before. Well, by the end of this 4-year period, they'll be paying the same rate as everybody else. They're all the ag non-potable. They're subject to the fact that they have the non-potable energy rate needs to be updated to be what's current. So that's what's going on for those two. March East is a whole nother story, only 40 customers there too, but all of that is driven by the calculations in the rate model. I'm going to pause and take a break. Any questions? That was a lot.
Directors, I would encourage this slide is the meat of what we have to present today, because we said as one of our goals that we got to deal with the non-residential rates. Now this is Riverside, and you see there's a story behind a number of these things, as Kevin spelled out, that we have some situations where, and you heard it, where with the last rate setting process, because of the board's desire to keep the rate down, and because we could not get a rate increase through quick enough, that we were in a situation where to take down what would have been a much, much higher rate increase, we essentially deployed the reliability charge to buy down what otherwise would be the customer's rate. But we know that we can't do that forever, because if we go back to the reliability charge, and Directors Galliano and Directors Genstedt were here when that charge was established in Riverside. And the reason why it was established in Riverside was because Riverside was using its property tax money to a lot of property tax money to primarily buy down the rate by offsetting the O&M costs. And so the rate was brought down because of property taxes. And then again, it was brought down by the use of the reliability money to apply to the capital component of what RPU was proposing. The problem with that is, as Kevin pointed out, that reliability money was really scheduled for other things to make up for the fact that we didn't have available property taxes in Riverside to take care of some of the capital needs. So it became a separate capital component. But it wasn't envisioned that it would be used to essentially buy down a water supply cost because of the capital component in that. We were really looking at new supply opportunities, and you heard that. As Kevin said, the reliability money was used to go ahead and pay for the financing on the CDA, the La Sierra pipeline, et cetera. So we're removing some subsidy is causing it. You're also seeing some issues with the energy costs that are coming through that are affecting some of it. So there's a story behind this stuff. And it now again is a good, you can ask questions now, or certainly we can reflect on it further, and you can bring questions back in the third workshop. But there is a lot going on in this slide.
All right, thanks, Rod. While we contemplate questions we got to keep getting through this material. So let's plow forward to the next slide. We can take questions at the end from the directors and come back. I'm going to turn it back over to Daisy.
Thank you, Craig. So this, can we go to the next slide, please? So we're on slide 40. Thank you. So the first table on this slide shows, so now we're, as we promised in the first workshop, in the second workshop, we would come back and disclose the Murrieta sewer rates. And so this is the result of that. The first table on this slide shows the historical rate adjustments for the last 5 calendar years. And so as you can see, we have not had a rate increase for customers served by the Santa Rosa Regional Resources Authority treatment plant since 2015. For customers served by Eastern Municipal Water District's treatment facility, they have seen for the last 4 years about a 3% annual rate increase in their monthly sewer bill. So our proposal is, as a result of performing the cost of service analysis for the Murrieta wastewater service area, has determined the following year-over-year increases in an average month sewer bill. For the customers served by the Santa Rosa Regional Resources Authority treatment facility, we are proposing no rate increase again for the first year, for year 1. For context, 97% of our Murrieta sewer customers are served by the Santa Rosa SRA. For short, is SRA, or Santa Rosa Regional Resources Authority treatment facility. And then for year 2, the monthly bill would increase 1.3%. And then for years 3 and 4, the rate would increase 2% each year. And as a monthly dollar impact to the sewer bill, to the monthly sewer bill, for years 2 through 4, it ranges between 56 cents and 90 cents, as you can see on the screen. And then these percentages are possible largely due to growth in that area and then projected increases from the Santa Rosa Regional Resources Authority Joint Powers Authority. For customers served by the Eastern Municipal Water District's treatment facility, we are proposing a 3.9% rate increase for the first year, then 4.2% annual rate increase in their monthly sewer rate for years 2, 3, and 4. This equates to a $1.70 impact for the first year per month for the sewer bill, and then $1.91, $1.97, and then $2.06 for years 2, 3, and 4 respectively. And these rates cover the projected annual cost growth from Eastern Municipal Water District. And now, next slide, please. So now we'll discuss the fixed system charge, which is one of our water rates to our customers. Next slide, please. So the fixed system charge, I will just read what's on the screen. So the fixed system charge pays for the cost to provide instant, anytime access to water. It covers costs that are required to sustain access and keep our entire system running safely. This charge is fixed, as Kevin mentioned before, and is based on the size of the meter. Next slide, please. So slide number 43. The proposed fixed systems charges continue the previously adopted approach, which is to use property tax revenue to subsidize the difference between what we had incorporated, which is the American Water Works Association method in the last rate process for these large size meters for the 6, 8, 10, and 12 meter sizes. For context, the phase-in of this phase-in affects 20 customers. Next slide, please. And now I will hand it off to Kevin to discuss the allocation of fire protection service costs.
All right, we've saved the easiest topic for last, I think. We'll see how easy it is or not. Fire protection service costs. This is a topic in my 17 years at Western we have never talked about during the rate setting process. But as you may be getting the indication over time, as we learn more and more about what are the best practices in rate setting, what is the most equitable and legally defendable, and yet financially supporting methodologies for allocating costs, we want to incorporate them. The goal really is to have equitable rates. If you cause a cost, you pay for the cost. It's that simple. If you don't cause a cost, you don't have to pay for it. Well, we've been studying our fire protection service costs. Now, I'm not talking about when a residential home has a sprinkler system in the attic or whatnot in the ceiling. That's not what we're talking about here. This is for either our public fire hydrants that you see along the street that are all owned by Western. Those are called public fire services, those fire hydrants. Or we're talking about private fire services. And this is for commercial properties. So that's this really large pipeline that goes into the property, and it's hopefully never used, because if it was used is either for testing or there's a fire, but it provides sprinkler fire suppression for the large commercial building or the small building and outbuildings and so forth. So public fire refers to fire hydrants. Private fire refers to that pipeline that goes into commercial properties. And that's one of the services on, I think, just about every, if not all, commercial accounts. Okay. I'm not talking about landscape, of course, or agricultural. Now, the current method for allocating operating costs, because there are costs that are attributable to having fire hydrants or having a private fire service for a commercial customer. Our current methods, neither of them are American Water Works Association methods at all. Okay. I think they just kind of came about over time, or back, before there was such, very clear and scientific methodologies for doing things. I really don't know. It was in place before I got here. But the current method for public fire hydrants is to take those costs associated with fire hydrants and just simply spread them proportionally across all the other costs. So it ends up being in the commodity rate, the fixed system charge rate, et cetera. Just spread it across everybody. For private, this is the one that truly isn't equitable. You are charged a monthly fixed system charge simply based on what's called the tattletale meter that is associated with that pipeline for fire flow. Okay, what is a tattletale meter? Kind of the way it sounds. It's a little bypass, like maybe a 3/4 inch bypass coming out one side of the pipe, going down, hitting a meter, and then coming back into the pipe. And that little 3/4 inch meter, if there's water going through the big pipe, some water will go through the little pipe. You've been using water. And if there's no fire, it could be because the customer is tapping into the fire service. And we don't have meters on that big pipeline because it's way too expensive to maintain a big meter that's not being used. They're very costly. So there's this little tattletale meter. Well, we've been billing the fixed their monthly charge, not on the hydraulic capacity that fire service could place on our system, and for which we built the system to accommodate. We've been billing them based off that little tiny meter. So the recommendation of the board is to, bottom line, follow the American Water Works Association method for allocating costs related to public and private fire. For public, it's a little more complicated, but a simple way of doing it that's in compliance with the AWWA is to simply use property tax revenue that is at the board's discretion and to cover costs. Okay, so that has an effect on tier 1 and tier 2 because we normally use our property tax revenue for retail water area in Riverside as an offset to delivery costs in tier 1 and tier 2. Long time practice. So that kind of reduces that a little bit. But the big side of it is we'll now be charging private fire an appropriate amount per month. Again, this is customer equity. Private fire services have not been paying their proportionate share of the cost of providing water service. And that's what we're looking to correct as we go forward here. And the next slide will give you an idea of the magnitude here. We won't spend a lot of time on the next slide. But you can see we have anywhere between a 3-inch and a 12-inch fire lines. Currently, they're just being billed a 3/4 inch meter per month. That's the $41.40. You'll see that for 100 of the customers in the first 3 diameter sizes, their monthly cost will actually go down. It's these bigger ones that have not been paying their proportionate share. and we want to go right in. Let's get that corrected. Now for Riverside, going from, if you're one of the 12-inch, going from $41 to $152 is not too bad. And then it progresses a fairly small increment the rest of the year. So that's for Riverside. But in Murrieta, it's very different. They have because they have a lot more business down there, I guess not per capita, but up here we have, 300 meters out of 21,000 meters. Down there, they have 116 meters out of 2,600 meters. So more of what are called the peaking costs that are calculated within the rate model fall on public fire hydrants in Murrieta and private fire protection services in Murrieta. And that's why you see a very significant increase, at least in that year one, or starting that year one. Thankfully, there's only one customer with a 12-inch. The other 6 are the 10-inch. But we have the names of those, and we can talk to the director from that area if she would like us to, but we have that information. But we won't communicate that because we're in a public setting here. But this is just how the math works itself out in order to be in compliance with the American Water Works Association methodology. And that concludes my comments on the private fire protection services. I think I'll turn it back over to Ron for the next slide.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Kevin. So we're coming up to the conclusion of our planned session for you today. In terms of wrapping some things up, we have a third workshop coming on the 22nd of March, and in that third workshop is when we're going to bring home everything to you. We will summarize workshops 1 and 2, the findings that came out of it, and again, we can certainly always deal with questions regarding the workshop information. As we have said, in your third workshop, we want to deal with water budget structural changes, and there is some impact to in-budget customers because you've heard about maybe doing something different in Tier 1 in terms of the gallons per day per customer. So you'll see that in this next workshop, as well as you're going to hear and see some ideas and thoughts about the penalty tiers and some changes that we want to make. Again, we always looking to respond to the questions, including questions that come in between the workshops by email. We're going to certainly help with the frequently asked questions in terms of subject matter information. And then lastly on here, the timeline and the upcoming customer information sessions. Sarah took us all through that. If we need to repeat some of that, we're at the conclusion now for questions. We can certainly repeat it now. So now is the time to reflect a little bit, certainly to ask us questions, maybe anything about the third workshop, anything that's been presented today, anything that you would like to see maybe differently in the third workshop. And so with that, I'm going to just throw it back to the directors and back to our board president.
Yeah, Brenda, if I might.
Absolutely.
You know what? There's a missing component here, in my opinion, and that is we need to talk about the quality of the water that our customers receive out of a combination of San Bernardino, and most all of it is state water project from the Mills plant. There's not a drop of Colorado River water in our system. And I think it's probably the highest quality water there is in the region. And that, I believe, is why Pepsi-Cola located where they located at. So it's nice to talk about all these various components of cost and everything else. But I think that we should always comment about the quality of the water that our ratepayers are receiving. So that's my thoughts on the process.
All right. Thank you, Director Galliano. We will take note of that. That's a good point. All
Director Gardner, any questions?
Yeah.
Not for me at this point. Thank you.
Director Torres, any questions?
I believe she had to jump off of the call, unless we hear from her. I heard she had to jump off.
She's left the meeting.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Risby, any questions?
I'm okay. I just want to say thank you to staff. It was a great presentation. I had quite a few questions last time, and this one covers a lot of them. So thank you so much for your hard work.
And I don't have any questions, but I do want to make a couple of comments. One, thanks to staff. This has been very informational. It's very detailed. You know, it's a lot of information to digest. So I would encourage all of my fellow directors, if you have questions, to go back to the general manager and make sure that those questions are asked before our next one so that we can clarify that or bring that as part of a clarity point for the next presentation. And I also want to comment on, and perhaps Rod could jump in here on a couple of savings points, but the real good news story here is on the sewer side for the Syrah area down in Marietta, and the significant amount of savings that have taken place over the last several years because of a lot of different financial components that have really come into play, and being able to capitalize on the SRF from the state to bring down that interest rate to stay into that JPA, which essentially saved our customers just about $16 million of going from a different plant that was offering service to us. And then all of the cost savings that we're having on the O&M side as we're doing and completing out that plant rehab down there for the treatment and all of the processes in that and the savings that are incorporated in that. So Rod, I'd really like to see that painted as the good news picture of why those increases have not been carried forward, because I don't want it to appear as if we are going to then have some significant increase on the backside just because we haven't done increases like we have in the past with other entities, and we've had no increases for a couple of years and then we do a large jump. So I'd like to make sure that we show people the hard work that all the staff have been doing with our agencies on that JPA to do that cost savings and why those increases have not happened.
And Madam President, you've said it very well. There's a lot of things that have happened for the benefit of the Marietta sewer customer, such that you look at the history of the rate adjustments, and because nothing is being proposed for the next year, it's something like a 6-7 year run of no rate adjustments that was made possible by a number of the things that you mentioned in your remarks. Capital savings here, debt, making sure that we got the absolute best deal when we were looking for borrowed money, and insisting that we go certain routes with the SRF, and it all produced significant savings. And so what we'll do in the third session is, that's a great storyline. We're going to tack something onto the presentation in the third session because that is a success story for the customers there, definitely.
And then one other comment too, and I would say this, that, our staff do an incredible job behind the scenes, and you guys work incredibly hard at your job to be the successful agency that we are. And there isn't anybody out there that's going to ring your bell louder than you guys. And I would encourage you in the next presentation to make sure that you're ringing that bell really loudly, and that you show the cost savings that we have given to our customers over the years by offsetting things in a number of areas that we have done, things like the interest rates. And we showed some of that today as far as making sure our bond ratings are much higher, and we're saving that, but you guys have also done a lot of work on grant funding opportunities and other things that customer money is not being used for, so that we can concentrate on specific areas. So I just want to make sure that you're highlighting your successes and the hard work that you've done over these many years to achieve those things, and what it translates out and what that means to our customers and how we're saving them. So just a couple comments for the next go round as we plug forward.
Yeah, thank you, President Denstead. And we actually have that in the future presentations when we envisioned that we would have more public participating, but we'll put that in the next workshop. So we touch on that, but it absolutely will be in our outreach materials. And also when we get to the hearing itself, we'll be doing that. So, but thank you for those comments.
All right, is there any other business that we have before us today, or any other additional slides?
One more comment before we adjourn. I think since our next workshop is an evening one, we may get more residential customers and maybe a few commercial customers who are able to participate in it who don't participate in a daytime workshop. So I think there might be benefit in, as part of the introduction in that workshop, just sort of recapping some of the rate history and more residential customer oriented things that we covered in the first workshop. At least I hope we get more people in that workshop. Our customer turnout at these has been kind of woefully low. And we're making a strong effort to communicate as best we can, but you can't make customers come and listen. But hopefully with an evening workshop, we'll get more customers. So I think that could be valuable if we just go through a little bit of the first workshop again as part of the introduction for the third.
Yeah, thank you, Director Gardner. That is the plan. We'll do that. And then as you heard from Sarah, we're actually going to take the show to the customers because it is difficult to draw them in. And, you know, these workshops are really our board workshops, so we can get into more of the details to make sure that our board understands what they're going to potentially take action on or what they're going to consider at the public hearing and in their future board rate setting actions. So it's very detailed. It's not really meant for the average customer. We're certainly happy if customers want to engage and listen, but you know, the real purpose of the workshops has been for the director's benefit. I recognize that having an evening workshop as a third workshop, potentially we may have more public. So we are going to try and be more public friendly, and we'll probably have a lot more of our frequently asked questions and other things that will hopefully engage the customers more. And it will be, there's very little new. We're going to talk about budget-based rates. Some adjustments to the budget-based rates, but it'll primarily be review of what we've covered so far.
I think that'll be valuable. Thank you.
All right. President Denstead, staff doesn't have anything more. We've been through a lot. I really appreciate the board's patience and the public's patience that hung with us the whole time. It was a lot of work by staff. I think our staff, our finance team, Rod, you and your team have done a fantastic job putting all this together and trying to make it understandable to people that don't live this every day like we do. And so thank you for all your effort, and Sarah, for all your efforts to create an outreach program. But I think we're ready to conclude, President Denstead.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate your participation today. We thank you for all of your questions, comments, concerns, and highlights. We want to make sure that we can incorporate everything and make it as easy as possible when we're communicating our message out there, and that it's understandable to the general public so that they understand what it is that we're doing and how hard we're working for them to make sure that they have reliable and clean drinking water and service provided to them every single day that they go to the tap, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So thank you so much for your dedication, your hard work, guys. Appreciate it. We'll call the meeting adjourned. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.